because it's so connected to the storytelling of what we're trying to portray. That's what makes it so exciting, because these quick creative solutions, they just kind of ebb and flow within everything that we're trying to do, and that's what makes it fun. Anyone that has a great deal of experience when it comes to communication and leading groups of people, it's going to be the biggest steps for your success, because that's the main bulk of it. You can have all the best ideas in the world, but if you don't have anybody that's willing to follow you, because you haven't developed that kind of rapport, then you're not going to get anywhere. If the scene works as naked as it is there, then I know when we add the other elements, we're on to something good. And then that's when the curation of that package becomes even more exciting, because then you see things a little bit differently when you start to add in all the little layers.
Welcome to the Theatre Art Life podcast. Today we're talking with Johnny Kim. After a performance career in dance, musical theatre and circus arts, Johnny Kim has spent the last 10 years in artistic direction, where he's led teams in various shows for both Franco Dragone as well as Cirque du Soleil. Post-pandemic, he helped relaunch the iconic ALEGRIA and is the current Artistic Director of BAZZAR. For the last 2 years, he has also served as juror for the Circus International Film Festival. Johnny, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Amazing to see your face.
Yes, good to see you as well.
Tell us and our audience where you are right now and what you're doing.
I'm currently on the East Coast of the United States in Hartford, Connecticut. And we're just wrapping up our last 2 weeks here on the North American tour, leading into our very last city of the USA portion in Minneapolis next month.
And the show is called BAZZAR, correct?
Yeah.
And this is like one of the lesser known Cirque du Soleil shows, I think, from everybody knows the big names of ALEGRIA and Saltimbanco and the ones in Vegas. Tell us about BAZZAR. What's special about BAZZAR?
Well, initially when they were making this was kind of a new business route that they wanted to try, where they were going to make a smaller show in which what I call the little top. And they wanted to bring Cirque du Soleil to places that they've never been to before. So on the map was going to be Saudi Arabia, India, and they were really dabbling with trying to see how they can get into Africa and just places that don't have that kind of exposure. So the show kind of pays homage to old Cirque du Soleil as how they started with street performers and some of those iconic acts that you'll see, but in kind of a more intimate setting, how it began before it became huge. And post-pandemic, we've relaunched the show into an actual big top and outfitted it for that. And just kind of evolved it to a place where we can still enjoy it as what we know the big top environment to be, but still pay homage to the old roots of Cirque du Soleil. And, what's really cool about it is that in this day and age with this generation, some of these acts kind of become new to this generation. So we all know that like hair suspension is a very old traditional circus discipline, but for a lot of people it's new. And then we also have things that are kind of reiterations of acts of past. So instead of like a tight wire, we have slackline, and it's trick lining on a slackline, which is kind of a modern take of something that's old as well. So yeah, it's a mixed bag of goodness, and it's lively. It's very colorful. It's got a lot of amazing music. And I just like the message of passing on to the next generation is kind of our theme.
And as artistic director, for those who've not really been involved in a Cirque du Soleil show, what's your day-to-day job, role, responsibilities on tour? All the things?
It's kind of all the things. At the core, you're protecting the integrity of the production, right? But that involves so much, because as we know, we're all humans and we're not machines. And so at the core of that, there's people that are going to be injured and or sick, and you're never really going to know what kind of combination of people that you'll have in that day. And that means what kind of combination of things you'll have in the show. So artistically, you kind of have to make a lot of creative solutions to put not just backup acts in, but transform certain scenes and scenarios to where we still have a full production to present what we want to say without it feeling like we're missing anything. But then that kind of ties into every element that goes into that, when it comes to the technicality of lights and sounds and how we build and move things with carpentry, the flights that we do when we're doing human performing flying with the rigging department and automation. And then also within the look, every person here is not going to necessarily be a cookie cutter placement. So every artist that comes in is going to be a little bit different, and we have to adapt that costume for them, the makeup design for them, the wig color, the hair. All of that gets entailed into the full picture. So on a day-to-day basis, it varies, but it's a little bit of everything. And essentially, you're leading a big group of people, but to put on the greatest show you possibly can in the evening.
Mm. Now, you've done this kind of role in a show that doesn't move around, and then you've done this in a show that does move around. So, like, what's unique about that job in a show that moves around that doesn't happen in a resident show?
I feel like your resources can be very limited on tour. First and foremost, with the staff and the artists that you have at hand. There are definitely resident shows that have the ability to have on-call artists that can just jump in at any moment in time. And on tour, you just have what you have. But that's also when it comes to technology as well. The stage and everything was built a very specific way. And so there are natural limitations. And so as you go around on tour, everything is a creative solution in order to evolve the show, keep the integrity in that sense, or just trying to have natural transcendence within that. But the joy of that is that when small mistakes happen, let's say within a performance, Stephen Bishop and I, he's our main character and clown on the show. We love to call them happy accidents because it kind of garners a new perspective. Sometimes those happy accidents turn into better solutions or better ideas, and it just creatively continues to grow into something grander. And for me, the show is more of a living organism in that sense, compared to a show that can sit down and kind of settle, if that makes sense.
It sounds like you have to be actually a little bit more creative solution finding on tour, because you got to make do with what you have. Do you feel that?
Yeah. And because it's so connected to the storytelling of what we're trying to portray, that's what makes it so exciting. Because these quick creative solutions, they just kind of ebb and flow within everything that we're trying to do, and that's what makes it fun. That's what helps grow the show. That's what helps make it more relevant for the audiences that we're going to. And every place that we go to receives the show in a different way. And we have to adapt to that as well, and sometimes we make changes based on that, whether it's language or the amount of pause and beats we have to take in certain places where people may applaud more. Because it's different everywhere you go.
Mm, mm. As you're in a leadership position, I want to ask, obviously you're going to some maybe very different places where you may not know or have a community, but in your community is the show itself and the people. But you're in a leadership position. How do you create in your own personal time or outside the show that distance that you may need from the rest of the crew? Or that's a difficult relationship to navigate, or is it? Tell me how that works for you.
I agree. It's difficult because there's no handbook for that, And so you kind of have to pick and choose some of the social events and how you partake in that, and conversations that you have. You have to be very cognizant of what you say and what you don't say, because we all know a couple drinks in and we just want to talk about everything under the sun. And that's not necessarily something that's appropriate. But I don't know if I have a method to that, but I just let it happen organically. And I think the first step is to just be able to have absolute trust and respect within your colleagues and the people that you lead, to where those boundaries don't get crossed, and the artists, for example, have been really good. We can have team barbecues, and we can go to a place to celebrate somebody's birthday, and no one ever crosses the line of asking intimate questions about the company or or things that are not going to be at this time public news. And so in that sense, it makes it easier for me to kind of navigate through if we have that foundation of respect and trust when it comes to separating work and play. And then when that happens,
Mm.
then you can truly enjoy your circus family for what it is and who they are without feeling like you have to tread in these weird shallow waters and walk on eggshells. And so I think everyone's process may be different. And for me, I just let it happen organically, but I'm very aware of how that can roll out. And I know when I need to exit stage left in certain scenarios. Yeah.
Have you ever done a major sort of faux pas in that trajectory from growing up into an artistic director role where you've kind of taken a step wrong here or there in that situation?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to even objectively say step in the wrong direction. For me, it was more so things had already been established a certain way. And then when you grow into a
Mm.
leadership role, having to retract from some kind of behaviors. Okay, to define this a little bit better, if I use, let's say, the House of Dancing Water as an example, my time there started as an artist and choreography captain. But then moving into artistic coordination and a more leadership role where you're pretty much, running the show when the artistic director was gone was a huge step. But the thing is that the trust was so evidently there, but my relationships with the people had started more intimately as artists. And so how
Mm.
we greet each other and we hug and how we kind of interacted was very, I would say, a little bit more intimate than it should have been for that leadership role when I moved up. But nothing really changed. And I'm not sure if that was a bad thing or a good thing, but I knew for myself that authentically I didn't want to change as a person just because of a role or a title. Yes, I had more responsibility, but I had a resistance to changing who I was at the essence of me, of Johnny Kim. But looking back,
Mm.
is it appropriate to have all these moments, where you're hugging and you're just having that kind of friendship that's borderline is maybe on the fence? Yeah, maybe. But at the time and at the scenario that we're at, where we're so far away from everyone, and this is all we have, and this is the foundation of a friendship that I had built from the beginning, and then moved into a leadership role, it's hard to define the two. But it was definitely a place of learning so that as I moved forward in my career, I could really reevaluate what that could look like, keep who I am within all of that, but then still have clearer boundaries moving forward.
I think that's a really cool assessment because I think that just points to the fact that it's very contextual, right?
Yeah.
The company that you're in, the circumstances that you come into that role, the responsibilities that you take, et cetera, and really does take you to read the room essentially and go, okay, this is an appropriate, still be me, but let me place myself in an appropriate level for things to work and function effectively as I need to in my role, right?
Yeah. I think that's really key.
Yeah.
Now that you mentioned it, and it's because even I've worked with so many international casts before, but if we looked at that one as a case study, there were a lot of Eastern Europeans in there that viewed me as who I was as an American. And culturally,
Mm.
I had to understand that and learn quickly that to have more mutual respect, the way I had my salutations in the day had to be very specific. So then I made a point to shake everyone's hand. I made a point to have the two-sided kiss with all the Europeans. And those things you had to change and adapt to, because if that was their version of having the ultimate respect as far as how you greeted somebody, then by all means, I wanted
Mm.
to make sure that that was the case, because you never wanted to
Mm.
feel like you were slagging somebody off because you didn't go shake their hand. And so if you didn't know that, well, you're going to have to learn quickly and adapt to it so that there is that foundational moment of trust and respect.
Totally. For those who want to transition from, like you have, from being a performer through to more roles in leadership and specifically artistic direction, what are the skills what do they need to cultivate from, you know, understanding performance and being able to perform to taking that leadership role? What do you think are the steps that you've taken, or the skills you needed to learn, or the traits that you inherently had that allowed you to take those progressive steps into those roles?
Well, I think the obvious points will be your artistic intuition as far as the vision of how everything can be, and then all the small parts that come together to create that, let's say, tableau, right? So as far as the role of being, let's say, an artistic director, I think it's inherently in the title. But what I think people forget and maybe don't focus enough on is the fact that you are a leader of a certain amount of people, whether it's 12 or up to 150, it's a lot. And so artistic and creativity aside, that is the main part of your role, is that you have to lead a group of people, and they can very well be from 26 different nationalities, and maybe English is not their first language. And so trying to have a common language to be able to even communicate and to be in a place to lead them and have this vision that they want to follow you into. It's like going into battle. Like, can I go with this guy? Do I feel like I trust this person to go to battle? And that is the key part of the role. And so I feel like anyone that has a great deal of experience when it comes to communication and leading groups of people, it's going to be the biggest steps for your success, because that's the main bulk of it. You can have all the best ideas in the world, but if you don't have anybody that's willing to follow you, because you haven't developed that kind of rapport, then you're not going to get anywhere, and I think that needs to be highlighted, is that any person in any role of leadership, whether you're a director or even a supervisor or a captain or whatever the lingo is, you have to be able to lead a group of people, whether it's a small group or a big group. And that takes a lot of natural talent, but also inherent qualities of being able to do that,
Mm. No, it's a talent. Do you think that that's like cultivated, learned? Did you have a person that you admired as a leader in your network that you then kind of was like, I'm going to model that, I'm going to steal that trait or lead like that?
I've had many in my career, throughout the performance career and throughout my leadership career, and they've all played a different role. But from the beginning, I would say, my biggest mentors through dance, if I look at Sue Gilson way back in the day, she just was able to find the qualities. And I don't like to use this word potential, but, when you find that in somebody and you're able to draw that out with the mentorship of teaching and spreading that knowledge, but also cultivating and encouraging somebody to believe, those are like the stepping points that I had been exposed to. But then when it gets on a grander scale, and that, because that one's very specific as far as like, oh, you have this talent, we should cultivate it in this way, it just starts to grow. And then, I had experiences in Michigan with another dance teacher, TD. But then in my life, the mentors that I've had, whether it was Maggie Sietsma in Singapore and Michael Smith in House Dancing Water, through yourself, Anna Robb, and some other people that had other qualities that I could take on board and emulate and or mirror, to kind of find my style within all of that, because you take all the best things that really affected you as a person in the best possible way, and you just add it to your arsenal of tools, right? And as you add that arsenal of tools and you start to implement it into your own way of teaching, your own way of leading, that all cultivates into your style with all the best things that you have been able to, take along the way. So there's been many people in my life that have contributed to that. I should probably make a list, because there's definitely more than a dozen.
And now a note from our sponsor. The Theatre Out Live podcast is proud to be sponsored by ClearCom. ClearCom is the leader in voice communications for theatre and the performing arts. Call your cues with the simplicity and elegance of ClearCom Intercom solutions. You can find them at clearcom.com. Go check them out. That's awesome. I mean, that's great. Like, it's not just one person. I agree. I think it's always to say, looking at that person and go, oh yeah, I like the way that person's handled that situation, or I like the way that they've inspired me to follow them, or
Yeah.
yes, I want to do that for you. What makes me want them to do, makes me want to do that for you,
Yeah.
You mentioned artistic intuition, and I know you play piano and you've been a dancer, and among other things, you've even sing a bit and all that sort of stuff. What cultivates artistic intuition, right? Like what would be those foundations? Does it start with as a child? Does it start with being around the arts? Is it something that somebody can cultivate anytime in their life? What do you think about that?
I mean, I feel like there's parts of it that's like nature versus nurture. I
Mm,
I feel like I was a very artistic child. I was gravitating towards a very huge amount of artistic things, whether it was allowed back then in my upbringing or not. I gravitated towards that. But then when I
mm,
was allowed to take part, I feel like the passion that I had for it and the love that I had for it kind of drew me into directions of just loving everything that I thought evoked such beauty and emotion. And so for me specifically, a lot of it has to come with feeling. And maybe it's because I am sensitive in nature, but when it comes to a visual, and we all love watching movies and we all love watching live theater, but when you start to see how those things can come together that evoke an emotion, even in its simplicity, you build that over time. And that's when the experience comes in, whether it's the things that you participated in as a job, as performer, or as an artist, or things that you just were exposed to along the way. In addition to that, even now in my position, I still love going to see other shows, grand, small, community theater, Broadway. It doesn't matter. And it's because all of it has something to say. And whether they have the technology or the money or not, you have to still figure out what it is your message is going to be. And when you see that creativity, it also sparks so much more inspiration and ideas within yourself and what you do to see how you can bring that back into your production. I just went to
mm,
go see Harry Potter on Broadway a few weeks ago. And we all know that's a play, and we all know it's not a movie, and it's based off of a book of the future. And it still had elements of music. It still had elements of lighting design and staging and magic, of course, but also moments of simplicity because they had all the technology as well. Um, and that just inspired me to come back to a show like BAZZAR that also is a foundational moment of simplicity, to where it's like, oh, how can I instill more into this without adding, but just making it in a way to where you can sit back and watch the simplest of scenes and transitions and go, wow, that made me feel something. And so that intuition is internal, it's learned, it's viewed, it's researched, but it's also observed. I mean, it's all the facets of how you naturally grow, and that intuition comes
mm.
with you as well.
I'm interested to ask you, is there something that is your immediate reaction when you see a show? And I'll give you an example. For me, it's the visual, because I think I studied art when I was younger, and I'm very drawn to something that is aesthetically beautiful. But you did music. Are you attracted or turned off more about the audio and what you're hearing, or the visual, or is there something that you're automatically judging based on your training when you're seeing a show?
I don't think I have anything specific because it all matches, it all comes together. I think
Mm,
soundtracks are there for a reason for movies because it helps dictate the feeling. That's one. But it also sometimes helps dictate where you're supposed to focus, because there's a lot that can happen on a screen. It's the same thing for live theater, right? And there's been studies that if music go up, you follow. I mean, the movie Up is an example. The melody that goes up while those balloons fly matches. And so
mm,
the visual of that and what you hear and what you see, it's all encompassing. So the lighting design has to be on point. The music has to be on point. The staging has to be on point, because that one visual of just one person standing in a spotlight could mean so much more than that person standing in a spotlight. based on how
Mm.
you package it. And so I'm right there with you. The visual is imperative, but it's all the elements that help support what you're looking at to tell the story that is also imperative. And I think without pinpointing, it kind of has to all come together, if that makes
Mm.
sense. And in that way, there are some scenes that I try and stage and maybe redevelop on BAZZAR, but we do this all in the daylight of the artistic tent on the black floor where everything is just unmasked. And then when we take it to the stage, we do the same thing. And for me, if the scene works as naked as it is there, then I know when we add the other elements, we're on to something good. And then that's when the curation of that package becomes even more exciting, because then you see things a little bit differently when you start to add in all the little layers, and you can go in a completely different direction after that, just because it ended up being more beautiful and or more grand than you ever expected it to be.
Mm. And how much freedom do you get given as an artistic director on BAZZAR with regards to staging that? I mean, do you have to? You didn't direct the original version of it, right? So do people give you the freedom to say, okay, we're going to stage it this way? Is there any reporting back to head office to say this is what we've done? Like, how does that work?
I think that's circumstantial. I think it's
Yeah.
mainly based on how the show was created and how those contracts were done, as far as
Hmm.
the legalities of it, or um, kind of the way that they wanted to go about it for the future. When it came to BAZZAR, all of these creators created this show, and they don't necessarily have the full control now, but it's my job to still keep the integrity of what was intended, because it's their work and I want to celebrate that,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
Um, but when it comes to evolving it, that I always have that in the back of my mind of the core of what we're trying to say and what was intentionally created. If we keep that, but then we tell it in a way that exemplifies and makes it more exponential or more obvious or more subtle, those are the nuances that I'm allowed to do as an artistic director, which I think is great, because I can sit back and look at Susan Goudreau's creation and know that how I've helped make that vision or that narrative arc for this character, whether it's clearer or more lovable, where you can fall in love with that character and like follow their journey, those are all the things that I kind of want to put in so that we can celebrate Susan's vision more so than it was before, because that's the whole point. The living organism needs to grow and needs to continue to tell this story that she wanted to tell, to reach so many different communities around the world.
I love that. Tell us about the Circus International Film Festival. What is that?
Well, when we think about art, we also think that they're all separate mediums, right? But this is a way of connecting the two. When it comes to cinematography and film and how we create those tableaus through digital medium, that can still be connected with circus. We see that in movies all the time, where there's been dance in movies, there's been stunt fighting in movies, and a lot of action-packed things. And in this form, in many different categories, it's about trying to merge the two, circus and film, together, and what can be created. And there's many ways to go about it. And so there's documentary style, there's short film non-documentary. I mean, there's different categories that you can submit to, and I think it's so beautiful to see people's creativity within circus, but then in that format of film. And so this is my second year being on the jury for short non-documentary, and I have to say the
Hmm.
talent that comes in every year is just exponential. It gets better and better. But it's exciting to see, because, it's like putting circus on the map in a different way to say, hey, we have cool things to say and things to do as well.
Mm. It also gets to, I guess, flex a little bit of storytelling through the film lens as opposed to a live stage, right? Which is mostly circus is known for in live performance. But what does that look like on film, and what could it look like? And
Yeah.
yeah, do you think that is it new, this one? Because I don't know if I've heard of it so much, but is it kind of born out of the pandemic? Because I know a lot of people made circus videos and stuff during the pandemic. Is it newish or not
It's
always been around?
newish. It's been around for a few
Mm.
years. But there have been some great things that have come out of it. You know, some things
Mm.
that I've seen through this have also been in other film festivals. Um, I think the first time I saw it must have been 4 or 5 years ago, and it's because Cirque du Cambodia was a documentary that was featuring Dina Sok, that was an artist that I worked with on Volta. You know, to come from a place like
Mhm.
Cambodia and never have had an artist from Cambodia in Cirque du Soleil, and then he made it. You know, it was the whole documentary about his journey, and it was so beautiful to watch, especially because it was somebody that I knew so personally. And so to watch that unfold and get to know Dina on the screen more so than I thought I did, yeah, I was in tears. It was so beautiful. And that's when I realized that there was something like this. And so lucky for me, I just was asked to be on the jury for a category last year. And then I was this year again. And it's been super joyous to see circus just in a different way.
Mm. I mean, I'm a full believer that the performing arts needs to work out better ways to digitally represent the stories behind what we do and how we do it and all of those sort of things, because that's where the fun is, right? That's where the stories are, that's where the characters are, and it doesn't even matter if it's the people on the stage, it's also the people working backstage that have eclectic histories and strange interests and interesting lives about where they've been, et cetera, et cetera. So it's there's so many stories there to put on television, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One of these
So
days, they
tell us,
should
what's
just do
your
a
favorite thing?
documentary. Oh,
Yeah, I know they do a documentary on all the things. So what's your most favorite thing about your job or the industry? Tell me.
oof. The people. I think there's something about circus where it just draws an international amount of people, right? International amount of people. You know what I mean? An amount of people that come from so
Yeah.
many different places. And I think having that kind of melting pot is not necessarily created in a lot of different places. Like, as much as
Mm,
I love Broadway, I know that they don't have the same amount of nationalities that we do. And I think that's such a beautiful thing that I get to experience on a day-to-day basis. You know,
mm,
learning who people are and where they come from and their story, and understanding the language of how we are able to communicate in that way is such a cool thing. And when you travel the world and you have that kind of experience, you also see the world in a different lens. I think if people love
mm,
to travel, yes, it's because you get to delve into that new culture, the food, the people, the sights. That is all evident. But when you have that experience by working with these people, and every place you go to, you have more nationalities that you've never worked with before, you honestly walk through the world a little bit differently, and you see the world so differently. And you want to be able to emulate what you experience in under the big top, which is peace and harmony, art, joy. And then you kind of feel like you're an ambassador for that. You want to walk out there and try and recreate that, and connect with the communities that you're now embarking on in these different countries. And that's the coolest part of my job, is being around that every day.
I love that, and I think that's probably one of the best answers to that question we've ever
Oh, yeah.
had.
Well, it's
I love it.
honestly the truth. It's so enriching and fulfilling for my life personally and professionally. And I think that's such a double whammy.
Oh, 100%. So if you could change one thing about your job or the industry, what would that be?
Oh, if I could change one thing about the job, it's a pipe dream, but it's the ability to transport all of my friends and my family around with me so they can experience what I experience. But we, of course, know that that's not possible. Um, when it comes to the
I like the
industry,
idea though.
I know, right? When it comes to the
Yeah.
industry, I guess, and I know that I don't have a solution for this, but I just wish that there was more of a balance between celebrating and creating the art, as well as fulfilling the business side. I think those checks and balances become skewed constantly, and they're never really balanced. And I don't think it ever will be, but it's something that I hope for, because let's be honest, shows and things are a business. It needs to make money. But when that scale gets tipped too high, then sometimes the craft is the one that's suffering. Of course, if we only focus on that and we don't make any money, then we can't continue to make new things. So I understand that side too. But I just wish if there was a way that we could make it more, even if it was 60-40, that would be better, But, I think that's just that passionate artist of me wanting to see the world in that way and knowing that it's not necessarily always feasible, but, it would be nice if we could all try.
Yeah, and I think that's like you with that essence and inner desire means that you're always looking to fight for that creative to still be there in the forefront of whatever you're doing, right? Despite those circumstances. And that's definitely what's needed, especially as an artistic director, to be the advocate for the art on all fronts, as well as the business, but also to be protecting it as much as you can.
Yeah. But I understand that everything's volatile, right? Like to put trust in a creative that says, hey, if we do this and we invest this money, it will work out in the end. But nothing is ever a guarantee, right? And so even doing that as a business choice, I understand is risky sometimes because you don't know what the end result will be. Even if all signs point to a green light, it's still a risk. And it's being able to navigate through that and understanding what risks we want to take and who do we want to instill that trust in. And so it's also then about the teams, So it's all connected and hopefully there will be a place where it's super balanced and we can just live in love and make good stuff.
Yeah. Amazing. Johnny, thank you so much for joining us on the Theatre Art Life podcast. It's so good to see your face. I'm really happy to see you and thank you for your time.
Oh, absolutely. You're welcome. And thank you for having me. It's been such a pleasure. Always.
Theatre Art Life is a global media site for entertainment. Memberships start at only $38 per year. You can have unlimited access to our daily published articles, including entertainment news and the writings of active industry professionals, ensuring that you are always up to date on the global happenings in the world of entertainment. Become a part of the international entertainment community and join us now at www.theatreartlife.com.